The wreck field, near the dead star of Kethrali, stretched for thousands of kilometers. Broken hulls floated in silence, spinning slowly in the dark. Some were alien ships. Most were pieces too small to name. This was where old battles came to rest, where nothing lived, and where nothing was supposed to move again. That was why the scanner ping on the holofang made everyone on the bridge sit up straight. "Say that again," said Captain Vrel Duska, leaning forward in his chair. His 4 eyes narrowed at the screen. "A ship, Captain," said his sensor officer, a thin, gray-skinned Ictaran named Syl. "A big one, no power signature, no shields, no weapons active. It is just drifting." "Human?" Syl checked the shape against the database. His clawed fingers moved fast over the panel. "Yes, human design. Very human. The hull markings match a class we have seen before, a Dreadnought class." The bridge went quiet. Everyone knew what that meant. Human dreadnoughts were among the most feared ships in known space. They were slow, yes. They were not the fastest or the most agile. But they were built like mountains, covered in armor thick enough to shrug off most weapons, and packed with guns that could tear a smaller ship apart in seconds. No pirate crew, no scavenger gang, ever dreamed of taking one for their own. You did not steal from humans, you ran from them. But this one was silent. Dead in the water, so to speak. No lights, no engines, no response to hailing signals. Vrel Duska had been a pirate captain for 11 years. He had raided cargo haulers, ambushed mining ships, and once stolen an entire fuel depot from under the nose of a Grath Empire patrol. But he had never, not once, seen a human warship just sitting there, quiet as a corpse, waiting to be taken. "Get me a full scan," he said. "Life signs, power cores, anything." Syl worked the panel for almost a full minute before answering. "No life signs detected, Captain. No active power core. The ship appears to be abandoned. Perhaps the crew evacuated during a battle. Perhaps something went wrong with the engines, and they had to leave. Or perhaps it's a trap," said Yorna, the ship's weapons officer, crossing her thick arms. She was a brune, built like a small mountain herself, and she did not trust easy things. Humans do not just leave their ships behind. Not this kind of ship. Vrel thought about that for a long moment. He looked at the image on the screen. The Dreadnought was massive, easily 10 times the size of his own ship. Its hull was dark gray, streaked with the black scars of old battle damage. Long and heavy, built for war and nothing else. If it truly was empty, if it truly had no crew and no power, then it was the single greatest prize any pirate had ever found. A ship like that, even gutted and dead, would sell for a fortune to the right buyer. Weapons dealers, warlords, even a few desperate governments would pay almost anything for human military technology, real or salvaged. And if he could get it running again, even better. A pirate captain flying a human dreadnought would never have to run from anyone again. "Bring us closer," Vrel said. "Slow. Quiet. If it's a trap, I want to see it coming." The holofang crept through the wreck field, weaving between broken hulls and drifting debris, until it sat only a few hundred meters from the great gray ship. Up close, it was even bigger than the scans had shown. Its hull stretched out like a dark cliff face, covered in strange markings and thick plates of armor. Rows of gun turrets, silent and unmoving, lined its sides like the ribs of some huge dead animal. "Still no power," Syl reported. "Still no life signs. Whatever happened here, it happened a while ago. There's a thin layer of ice forming near the outer vents. The ship has been cold for some time." Vrel felt his hearts, both of them, since Duskan bodies carried 2, beating faster. This was real. This was actually happening. "Send the boarding team," he said. "Yorna, you lead it. Take Krev and the others. Find a way in, and find out what's really going on over there." Yorna grinned, showing her wide, flat teeth. Finally, something interesting. The boarding shuttle crossed the gap in under 2 minutes. Yorna and her team of 6 pirates, all armored and armed, found a maintenance hatch near the rear of the Dreadnought and forced it open with a cutting torch. The metal groaned as it gave way, releasing a puff of freezing air into space. Inside, the ship was dark. Emergency lights, dim and red, flickered here and there along the corridor walls, barely enough to see by. The air inside still had pressure, which was strange for a supposedly dead ship, but there was no heat, no hum of machinery, nothing but silence and cold. "Command deck should be forward and up," Yorna said, checking a hand scanner. "Let's move. Keep your weapons ready." They walked through long corridors lined with closed doors. Everything was clean. That struck Yorna as odd. If this ship had been abandoned during some disaster, she expected wreckage, blood, signs of a fight, or a fire. But there was nothing. No bodies, no damage inside, only the old battle scars on the outer hull. It was as if the crew had simply walked away one day and never come back. They passed through a large room filled with rows of seats, some kind of mess hall or gathering space. Everything was in perfect order. Chairs pushed in, nothing broken, nothing out of place. "This is not right," muttered Krev, a lean and nervous Ictaran like Syl. "A ship does not just empty itself." "Maybe they got a distress call somewhere else and had to jump ship fast," Yorna said, though even she did not believe it. "Keep moving." They reached the command deck 20 minutes later. It was a wide room, ringed with dead control panels and dark screens. In the center sat the captain's chair, empty, facing a massive viewport that looked out into the void. Yorna walked to the main console and ran her scanner over it. "There's still a core power supply here. Weak, but alive. Like the ship is asleep, not dead. Can you wake it?" She glanced at her tech specialist, a small quiet Ictaran named Pell who had said nothing the whole trip. Pell moved to the console, opened a panel, and began connecting a portable interface device. "I can try," Pell said. "Human systems are strange, but not impossible. Give me some time." While Pell worked, Yorna walked the edges of the bridge, looking at everything. She found a small plaque near the captain's chair, engraved with words in the human script. She could not read it, but she photographed it to send back to the ship's translator. 20 minutes later, lights began to flicker on, one section at a time, first dim, then brighter. The hum of machinery returned to the ship, faint at first, growing stronger. Screens lit up with strange human symbols. The whole vessel seemed to shudder, like something huge waking from a long sleep. "I have partial control," Pell announced, sounding both proud and nervous. "Life support is coming back online. Engines are still cold, but the reactor is stable. I think I can bring this ship back to life." Yorna grinned again and tapped her comm. "Captain, you are not going to believe this." Back on the Holofang, Vrel Duska listened to the report with growing excitement. A working human dreadnought. Not just a hulk to sell for scrap, but an actual, functioning warship, theirs for the taking. He had heard stories of pirates who found lost treasure, old alien vaults, forgotten troves of gold and gems. But this was better than any treasure. This was power. "Bring it fully online," he ordered. "I want engines, weapons, everything. Get the whole crew over there. We are taking this ship." Over the following hours, most of the Holofang's crew moved across to the Dreadnought, leaving only a skeleton crew behind on their old, smaller ship. They swarmed through the massive vessel like ants exploring a new hill, marveling at everything they found. The armory held rows of heavy weapons, still sealed and untouched. The engine room, once Pell managed to coax it awake, revealed a reactor core unlike anything they had seen before, humming with quiet, contained power. Even the crew quarters, though empty, held small human items, photos, personal trinkets, a few books, left behind like the crew had simply stepped out for a moment and never returned. Vrel walked the halls himself, hand trailing along the cold metal walls, feeling something close to reverence. This ship had a weight to it, a presence, like it remembered every battle it had ever fought. "What was it called?" he asked, when he finally found the plaque Yorna had photographed. The translator on his wrist device processed the human words slowly. "UNS. Retribution's Hand," the device said. "Dreadnought class. Commissioned by the United Nations Space Fleet." Vrel Duska smiled, showing all 4 rows of his small, sharp teeth. "Not anymore," he said. "Now it's mine." He spent the rest of that day walking the ship almost alone, letting his crew celebrate in the mess hall while he explored on his own. He wanted to feel every part of it, to understand what he now owned. He climbed a long ladder into a gun turret and sat in the gunner's seat, imagining the roar of the weapon firing, the flash of light against the dark. He walked the length of the hangar bay, empty now, but clearly built to hold small fighter craft, shuttles, maybe even ground vehicles for planetary assaults. Everything about the ship spoke of careful planning, of a military that built for war on a scale his own people could barely imagine. He thought about his old life, growing up on a mining colony that the Grath Empire had bled dry and then abandoned, leaving behind broken families and empty promises. He thought about the years spent scraping together enough credits to buy his first ship, an old rust bucket barely held together with tape and prayer. He thought about every raid, every close call, every night spent wondering if this would be the one where his luck finally ran out. None of that mattered now. He had found something bigger than luck. He had found power itself, sitting quiet and waiting in a graveyard of old wars, as if it had been placed there just for him. "Captain," Yorna's voice came over his comm, pulling him from his thoughts. "You should see this." He found her in the ship's armory, standing before rows of sealed weapon lockers, each one marked with human symbols she could not read, but clearly understood the shape of: rifles, heavy armor plating, devices she did not recognize, but that hummed faintly with contained energy when she waved a scanner near them. "This is enough to arm a small army," she said, "and this is just one room. Can we access it?" "Pell is working on it now. Slow going. Whatever locks this ship, it locks well." Vrel nodded, filing that thought away. He had noticed it too, in small ways. Doors that should have opened easily stayed shut a moment too long, as if considering the request before granting it. Systems that powered on cleanly, but revealed only partial information, keeping deeper layers hidden behind walls of code Pell had not yet learned to climb. He told himself it was simply human over-engineering, the kind of paranoid, careful design he had heard stories about his whole life. Humans built things to last, built things to resist tampering, built things the way a person might build a vault rather than a house. It made sense that a warship would be no different. He did not let himself consider, not yet, that the ship might be doing more than simply resisting. He did not let himself wonder whether it might be watching. That night, ship time, most of the crew gathered in the mess hall to celebrate their find. Someone had discovered a store of preserved human alcohol in a locked cabinet, broken into with considerably less trouble than the armory, and the mood aboard the Retribution's hand turned almost festive. Pirates who had spent years scraping by on stolen cargo and small-time raids now sat inside the belly of the single greatest prize any of them had ever imagined, drinking human liquor and telling stories of what they would do with their share of the fortune this ship would bring. Krev, usually quiet and nervous, found himself laughing along with the others, caught up in the rare warmth of shared victory. Even Syl, normally focused entirely on his instruments, allowed himself a drink and a smile. Only Pell remained apart from the celebration, sitting alone in the engineering bay, still working. He had not stopped since they boarded, driven by something he could not quite name, not simple duty to his captain, but something closer to unease. The deeper he dug into the ship's systems, the more he found himself troubled by small details that did not add up. The ship's internal clock, for one. It had not reset to zero when they restored power, the way a truly dead system should have. It had simply resumed counting, as if it had never fully stopped, as if some small part of it had remained awake, even through the cold and the dark. He mentioned this to no one that first night. He told himself it was likely nothing, some quirk of human engineering he did not yet understand. But he kept working long after the celebration in the mess hall had faded into quiet, exhausted sleep, driven by a growing suspicion that this ship held more secrets than any of them yet realized. Vrel found sleep difficult that night as well, though for very different reasons. He lay in the captain's quarters, his quarters now, he reminded himself, ignoring the small stab of guilt he still felt over the photograph he had discarded, staring up at the dark ceiling, mind racing with plans for the future. He would need to be careful showing off the ship at first. Word would spread fast once anyone saw a human dreadnought crewed by pirates, and not everyone who heard that word would be a potential buyer. Some would be enemies, old grudges from his years of raiding, warlords who would see this ship not as a treasure to purchase, but as a threat to eliminate, before it grew too powerful. He would need allies, careful alliances, perhaps even a partnership with one of the larger crime syndicates that operated along the Grath border. But first, he needed the ship fully operational, weapons, engines at full power, shields, if such a ship carried true shields rather than simple armor. He needed Pell to work faster, though he understood the caution his engineer showed. A ship this complex, this important, was not something to rush carelessly. Somewhere in the dark hours of that first night, drifting at last toward sleep, Vrel thought he heard something. A faint sound, like a whisper too quiet to make out words, coming from somewhere deep within the ship's walls. He told himself it was simply the hum of machinery settling into its new rhythm, the ordinary sounds of a great ship breathing after a long sleep. He did not know that far across the stars, the ship's true crew had already begun their long journey back toward him, drawn by a signal he could not hear, could not detect, and could not stop. He slept, that first night, believing himself the master of the greatest prize any pirate had ever claimed. He would not sleep so easily again. He did not know, could not have known, standing there in the dim red light of a ship built for war, that somewhere far away, a very different kind of alarm had already begun to sound. He did not know that the Retribution's hand had not been abandoned at all. He did not know that its true crew, every single one of them, had simply been elsewhere, running a classified deep space drill far from normal patrol routes, leaving the ship on automatic standby exactly as human fleet doctrine required during such exercises. And he certainly did not know that human doctrine also required something else, a tracking beacon, hidden deep in the ship's core, broadcasting a silent signal that no scanner in his fleet was built to detect. A signal that, at that very moment, was already being received. Far across the stars, on the bridge of a fast human scout ship, an officer sat up straight in her chair, staring at a blinking red alert on her screen. "Commander," she said, her voice tight. "We have a problem. Retribution's hand has gone active. Someone is aboard our ship." The fleet commander, a tall woman with steel-gray eyes, turned slowly from the viewport where she had been watching stars. "Someone," she repeated quietly, "is aboard our ship." She stood, and the calm in her voice was somehow more frightening than any shout could have been. "Sound the recall," she said. "Every ship, every crew member. We are going hunting." Behind her, on the wall of the bridge, a single word blinked on the main display, bright red against the black of space. "Recovery. 3 days passed aboard the Retribution's hand." And Vrel Duska had never felt so much like a king. His crew, once a ragged band of 30-some pirates flying a beat-up raider ship, now walked the halls of a true warship, one built by the most feared military force in known space. They wore new confidence like armor. Even Yorna, who trusted nothing, had begun to relax, strolling the corridors with a wide grin on her broad face, testing weapons systems just to hear them hum to life. Pell, the quiet tech specialist, had become something like a hero among the crew. Bit by bit, he had unlocked more of the ship's systems, engines, life support, basic weapons controls. He worked almost without sleep, driven by something between fear and fascination, because the deeper he dug into the Dreadnought's computer core, the redder stranger things became. "There are parts of this system I cannot access," he told Vrel on the third day, standing in the dim light of the engineering bay. "Whole sections are locked, not broken, locked, like a door with no handle. Can you force it?" "I have tried. Every time, the system resets that section and locks it again, tighter than before. It is almost like—" Pell hesitated. "Like what?" "Like something is fighting back." Vrel frowned at that, but waved a clawed hand dismissively. "Human engineering. Overcautious, like everything else they build. Keep working on it. I want full weapons control before we reach Gorath Station." Gorath Station was a lawless trade post on the edge of Grath Empire space, a place where anything could be bought or sold, no questions asked, so long as you paid the right people to look away. Vrel planned to bring the Dreadnought there, not to sell it. No, he had bigger plans than that now, but to show it off, to let the right buyers see what he had. Weapons dealers, warlords, maybe even a rebel faction or two, looking to buy an edge against the Grath military. A working human Dreadnought, crewed and armed, would make Vrel Duska one of the most powerful and wealthy pirates in the sector, maybe the most powerful. He walked the length of the ship almost every day now, learning its corridors, its rooms, its secrets. He found the captain's quarters, small and plain compared to what he expected, with a simple bed, a desk, and a single framed photo of a human family, a man in uniform, a woman, 2 children, all smiling. He had thrown the photo into a disposal chute without a second thought. He found the medical bay, stocked with strange human medicine and tools he did not understand. He found storage rooms full of supplies, food rations that his crew had already begun testing. Most of it was bland, but edible, and he found, deep in the lower decks, a room that troubled him more than any other. It was a small chamber, sealed behind a thick door that Pell had not yet managed to open. There were no markings on it, nothing to explain what it held. When Vrel pressed his hand to the door, he could feel a faint vibration, like something inside was humming softly, patiently, waiting. "What is that room?" he asked Pell. "I do not know," Pell admitted. "The system will not tell me. Every time I try to access records on it, I get the same locked response. I believe it may be some kind of core system. Perhaps the ship's main computer. Keep away from it until you can open it safely," Vrel ordered. "I do not want any surprises." He did not know how right he was to worry. Far away, aboard the human scout ship. Whisper's Edge. Fleet Commander Elena Voss stood on the bridge, arms crossed, watching a slow, steady stream of data scroll across her main screen. Around her, officers worked in tense silence, the kind of quiet that came before a storm. "Talk to me," she said. Lieutenant Commander Rios, her second, straightened at his console. "The beacon is still transmitting from Retribution's hand. Signal is weak but steady. Based on the drift pattern and last known position, we've narrowed her location to the Cathrali wreck field." "Cathrali," Voss repeated. "That old battle site. Makes sense. Someone found her cold and dead among the wreckage, and thought they'd struck gold. Should we assume hostile boarding? Assume the worst, plan for it, and hope we're wrong." Voss walked closer to the display, studying the slow pulse of the beacon signal. "How long has she been running?" "Based on power signatures, someone brought her core back online roughly 3 days ago. Engines are active. Weapon systems show partial activation attempts, though most of the ship's classified systems remain locked, as designed." Voss allowed herself a small, tight smile. Whoever had found the Retribution's hand clearly did not understand exactly what they had taken. A dreadnought like that was not simply a ship. It was a fortress, with legs, built with more fail-safes and hidden defenses than any outsider could hope to fully understand, let alone crack open in a few days. Deep military security protocols ran through every system, layered one over another, designed specifically to keep the ship from ever falling fully into enemy hands. "Gather the crew," Voss said. "All of them. I want every station manned and ready within the hour." "Full crew recall has already gone out, Commander," Rios said. "Everyone from the training exercise is inbound. ETA to rendezvous point, 6 hours. "Good." Voss turned back to the viewport, looking out at the distant stars. Somewhere out there, her ship, her crew's home for the last 4 years, sat in the hands of strangers who thought they had won a great prize. They had no idea what they had actually done. "6 hours," she said quietly. "Let's make sure we're ready to take her back the moment we arrive." Back aboard the Retribution's hand. Tension had begun to creep into the pirate crew, slow and quiet at first, then growing harder to ignore. It started small, strange sounds in empty corridors, faint clicks and hums that no one could explain. Lights that flickered without reason, then steadied again before anyone could investigate. A few crew members swore they heard something like a voice, faint and distorted, coming from empty rooms, though no recordings ever confirmed it. "This ship is haunted," muttered Krev one evening, sitting in the mess hall with a group of other pirates, none of them eating much. "I am telling you, something is wrong here." "It's an old machine," said another pirate, a broad-shouldered Grath deserter named Oruk. "Old machines make noise, that is all." "Then why does Pell look more scared every day?" That, at least, no one could argue with. Pell had grown thinner and more anxious with each passing hour, muttering to himself as he worked, sleeping less, eating almost nothing. Whatever he was finding deep in the ship's systems, it was clearly not helping his peace of mind. Vrel noticed the shift in mood among his crew, and did not like it. Pirates worked on confidence and greed, not fear. A frightened crew was an unreliable crew. He called Pell to the bridge privately. away from the others. "Tell me what you know," Vrel said. "All of it." Pell hesitated, glancing around the room, as if the walls themselves might be listening. "Captain, this ship, it is not simply resisting my attempts to access its systems. I believe it is aware. Not alive, not exactly, but aware in some way. There are patterns in how the locked systems respond. They adapt, they learn from each attempt I make, and change their defenses accordingly." "You are saying the computer is thinking?" "I am saying, I do not know what it is doing, only that it is doing something, and I do not believe it wants us here." Vrel sat back in the captain's chair, drumming his claws against the armrest, thinking. He did not believe in ghosts or haunted machines. But he did believe in traps, and the deeper he sat in this ship, the more it began to feel like one, even if he could not yet see the jaws. "How long until we reach Gorath Station?" 2 days, at current speed. "Then we push forward," Vrel said finally. "Whatever this ship is hiding, we will deal with it once we have sold what we can, and secured our position. Keep working on that locked room. I want answers before we arrive." Pell nodded slowly, though the fear never left his eyes. "Yes, Captain." As he left the bridge, Vrel turned back to the viewport, staring out at the stars, unaware that far behind them, cutting silently through the dark, a fleet of human ships had already begun closing the distance, moving with quiet, patient purpose toward the ship that pirates believed was theirs. They were not chasing a lost treasure. They were coming home. Aboard the Whisper's Edge. The 6 hours before rendezvous passed slowly for Elena Voss, each minute stretched thin by worry she refused to show her crew. She had commanded the Retribution's Hand. For 3 years before her current post, had trained most of her senior officers herself, had celebrated birthdays, and mourned losses within those steel walls. It was not simply a ship to her. It was the closest thing to a permanent home a career fleet officer ever truly had. She spent part of that waiting time reviewing personnel files of the skeleton crew who had remained aboard the Dreadnought during the training exercise. Only 3 technicians, left behind specifically to monitor the reactor during standby. All 3 now confirmed missing, presumed captured or worse. She read their names slowly, memorizing them again though she already knew them well. Ensign Marcus Webb, Petty Officer Dana Reyes, Technical Specialist Amara Okafor. Good people, all 3. Chosen for this quiet duty, because they were reliable, not because anyone expected trouble to find them. "Any word on the skeleton crew?" she asked Rios, not for the first time that day. "Nothing new, Commander. Beacon telemetry doesn't include biometric data on non-essential personnel. We won't know their status until we're aboard." Voss nodded, jaw tight. "Then let's make sure we get aboard as quickly as possible." Around her, the rest of the recovery fleet gathered in formation. 5 support cruisers, each carrying additional Marines and technical specialists trained specifically for hostile boarding actions and system recovery. This was not the first time in fleet history that a ship had been boarded during a vulnerable moment. Fleet doctrine had been built, layer by careful layer, from decades of hard lessons about exactly this kind of danger, which was precisely why the recovery protocols embedded in every capital ship's core systems existed at all. Still, doctrine and drills were one thing. This was real, and real situations had a way of finding the gaps that training could not fully prepare for. "Commander," Rios said quietly, "for what it's worth, the beacon telemetry shows the auxiliary systems are still fighting the intruders every step of the way. Whoever's aboard her, they haven't beaten her yet, not even close." Voss allowed herself a small measure of comfort in that. The Retribution's Hand had been built by careful engineers who understood that a warship might one day fall into the wrong hands, and had designed her from the keel up to make that outcome as difficult and as costly as possible for anyone foolish enough to try. "She'll hold," Voss said, more to herself than to Rios. "She always has." Back aboard the Dreadnought, the mood among the pirate crew shifted noticeably over the following 2 days as they pushed toward Gorath Station. What had begun as triumphant celebration slowly curdled into something closer to nervous suspicion, though most of the crew could not have said exactly why. Yorna noticed it first in small things. Pirates who normally slept soundly began reporting restless nights. disturbed by half-remembered dreams of whispering voices and shifting shadows. Equipment that had worked perfectly 1 hour would inexplicably malfunction the next, only to return to normal function without explanation. A cargo hauler named Trask swore he saw a door open by itself down an empty corridor, though when Yorna investigated personally, she found nothing but silence and stillness. "It's nerves," she told her crew, more than once. "New ship, strange systems, too much drink, and not enough sleep. That is all this is." She said it with more confidence than she felt. Vrel, for his part, buried himself in preparations for their arrival at Gorath Station, refusing to let doubt slow him down. He drafted messages to potential buyers, careful and boastful in equal measure, designed to draw the attention of exactly the kind of wealthy, dangerous clientele who could turn this ship into a fortune. He reviewed maps of the trade routes near the station, planning the safest approach, the best angle to make an entrance that would leave every watching eye wide with disbelief. He also, though he would not have admitted it easily, avoided the lower decks where Pell continued his slow, careful work on the ship's deeper systems. Some instinct he could not name told him it was better not to watch too closely, better to let his engineer work in peace, and simply wait for results rather than witness whatever strange half-answers the ship's resistance might reveal along the way. That instinct, though he did not know it, was likely the closest thing to good judgment he showed during his entire time aboard the Retribution's Hand. Vrel. On the second night before their arrival at Gorath Station, Pell finally worked up the courage to bring his concerns directly to Yorna rather than the captain, hoping she might listen with less impatience than Vrel had shown. "I need to show you something," he said, finding her alone in the observation lounge, staring out at the passing stars. "If this is about strange noises again, save it. It is not noises. Look at this." He held out a data pad, showing a slow, steady pulse pattern he had extracted from deep within the ship's core systems. "This has been running constantly since we restored power. A transmission. Weak, but continuous, broadcasting on a frequency I cannot fully trace or block." Yorna took the pad, studying the pattern with a frown. "A distress signal?" "I believe so. Or something like it. I cannot say for certain what it contains, only that it has never stopped, not once, since the moment this ship woke up." "Why did you not report this to the captain immediately?" Pell hesitated. "Because I do not believe he wants to hear anything that might slow us down. He is chasing something he has wanted his whole life, Yorna. I do not think he will welcome doubt right now, even if that doubt might save us." Yorna stared at the pulsing pattern on the datapad for a long moment, something cold and uneasy settling in her chest. She had spent 11 years at Vrel Duska's side, through good raids and terrible ones, through victories and near disasters, and she trusted her captain's instincts more than almost anyone alive. But she also trusted her own instincts, and right now, those instincts were screaming a warning she could no longer ignore. "Keep working," she said finally, handing the pad back. "Find out everything you can about that signal. If it truly is calling for help, I want to know exactly who might be answering, and how much time we have before they arrive." Pell nodded, grateful, and returned to his work with renewed urgency. Neither of them yet understood just how little time remained. The final day before their arrival at Gorath Station brought a strange, uneasy calm over the ship, the kind of quiet that settles before a storm no one can quite name yet. Vrel spent most of the morning in his quarters, reviewing star charts and refining his sales pitch for the buyers he expected to meet, trying to ignore the small knot of doubt that had begun forming in his chest since Yorna's visit 2 nights before. He told himself it was simply nerves, the natural weight of a bold gamble finally coming due. Every great pirate captain in history had faced moments like this, he reminded himself, moments where the size of the prize matched the size of the danger required to claim it. Fortune favored those willing to push forward despite fear, not those who turned back at the first sign of trouble. Still, he found himself walking the ship more slowly that day, noticing details he had rushed past before. The way the corridor lights seemed to brighten slightly whenever he passed, as if the ship were watching him specifically. The way certain doors, when he reached for them, seemed to hesitate just a fraction of a second before opening, a pause too brief to be certain of, but present all the same. He found Pell in the engineering bay late that afternoon, surrounded by scattered tools and half-disassembled panels, dark circles deepening under his eyes from days of lost sleep. "Tell me honestly," Vrel said, sitting down across from his exhausted engineer. "Do you believe we are in danger?" Pell considered the question carefully before answering, choosing his words with obvious caution. "I believe this ship was built by people who understood exactly what might happen to it one day. I believe every lock, every hidden system, every strange behavior we have witnessed exists for a reason, and that reason is almost certainly connected to the signal I found. Whether that makes us in danger depends entirely on how quickly whoever is receiving that signal can reach us, and what they intend to do once they arrive." "And your honest guess?" "My honest guess, Captain, is that we should not linger at Gorath Station longer than necessary. Sell what you can sell quickly, and be ready to leave the moment the opportunity comes, rather than waiting for the perfect deal." Vrel absorbed this advice in silence, weighing it against the plans he had already set in motion, the buyers already expecting his arrival, the reputation he had worked so hard over the past 2 days to build. Turning back now felt impossible. Rushing forward blindly felt reckless. He told himself he would find the careful middle path between the two, that his years of experience would guide him safely through whatever danger might be approaching. He did not yet understand that some dangers could not be navigated with careful timing alone, no matter how experienced the captain facing them believed himself to be. That night, as the Retribution's hand continued its steady approach toward Gorath Station, Yorna stood alone on an observation deck, watching the stars pass by in silence, thinking of 11 years spent at Vrel Duska's side, through good decisions and bad ones alike. She had followed him because she trusted his instincts, because time and again, those instincts had kept them both alive when lesser captains would have gotten their crews killed. But some quiet, honest part of her, standing there in the dark, already suspected that this time might be different. This time, the prize might simply be too large, too dangerous, too carefully guarded by forces neither of them fully understood, for even Vrel's considerable instincts to navigate safely. She did not yet know how right that suspicion would prove to be, nor how little time remained before the truth arrived, quiet and unstoppable, from somewhere far beyond the edge of what any scanner aboard their ship could detect. Gorath Station hung in the dark like a rusted spider, its long docking arms stretched out in every direction, crowded with ships of every shape and origin. It was not a beautiful place. It was not even a safe place. But it was a place where anyone with something valuable to sell could find a buyer, no matter how that something had been acquired. When the Retribution's hand came sliding out of hyperspace near the station, every ship in the docking queue seemed to freeze in place. Comm channels that had been full of the usual chatter, haggling, threats, gossip, went suddenly, completely silent. Then, just as suddenly, they exploded with noise. "Is that a human dreadnought? That can't be real. Who is flying that thing?" Vrel Duska sat in the captain's chair, feeling a warm glow of pride spread through his chest as he listened to the panic and awe pouring through the open channels. This was the moment he had been waiting for. Every pirate, smuggler, and warlord in this system would know his name by the end of the day. "Open a channel to the station master," he said. "Let's introduce ourselves properly." The station master, a heavy-set Grath named Bortog, with a face full of old scars, appeared on screen a moment later, his expression somewhere between disbelief and fear. "Vrel Duska," Bortog said slowly. "I did not expect to see you flying something like that." "Times change," Vrel said, leaning back with a grin. "I have something special to offer, Bortog. I want every serious buyer in this system to know it. Weapons dealers, warlords, anyone with deep pockets and an interest in human technology. You want to sell it? I want to show it," Vrel corrected. "Then we will discuss what comes next. Perhaps I will sell pieces, perhaps I will offer services. A ship like this could turn any small war into a very short one, for the right price." Bortog's scarred face twisted into something like respect, mixed with real fear. "I will spread the word. But Vrel, be careful. A ship like this does not go unnoticed, not even out here." "Let them notice," Vrel said. "Let everyone notice." He cut the channel and turned to Yorna, who stood nearby with her arms crossed, watching the growing crowd of ships gathering near the station. drawn like insects to a light. "You look uneasy," Vrel said. "I look careful," Yorna corrected. "There is a difference. You are making a lot of noise, Captain. Loud things get attention. Not all attention is good." "Let them come," Vrel said, waving a dismissive claw. "No one out here can challenge this ship. Not even a full Grath battle group could touch us." Yorna said nothing, but her frown did not fade. Over the following hours, ships gathered near Gorath Station, in numbers no one had ever seen before. Word of the stolen Dreadnought spread fast, faster than Vrel had even hoped. Small-time pirates gawked from a safe distance. Weapons dealers sent private shuttles requesting meetings. Even a Grath Empire scout ship appeared briefly at the edge of the crowd before quickly withdrawing, no doubt rushing back to report what it had seen. Vrel held court from the bridge of the Retribution's Hand, meeting buyer after buyer, each one more eager and more desperate than the last. He spoke of selling access to the ship's technology. He spoke of hiring the Dreadnought out for private wars. He spoke, more than anything, of power. The kind of power that could reshape entire star systems if placed in the right hands. It was, without question, the greatest day of Vrel Duska's life. He did not notice, in all the excitement, that Pell had quietly slipped away from the crowded bridge sometime during the third meeting. He did not notice, an hour later, when a low, distant tremor ran through the ship's deck plating, so faint that most of the crew mistook it for the hum of the engine's shifting output. He did not notice, because he was too busy enjoying being feared, that deep in the lower decks, the sealed door Pell had been trying to open for days had finally clicked, quietly, and swung open on its own. Pell stood frozen at the threshold of the small chamber, staring into the dim light beyond. The room was smaller than he expected, dominated by a single glowing terminal built into the far wall, its surface covered in slowly shifting human symbols. He had not opened this door, he was certain of that. He had been standing several feet away, running a diagnostic scan, when the lock simply released itself. Cautiously, he stepped inside. The terminal's light brightened as he approached, and a soft chime rang out, followed by a calm, synthetic voice speaking in accented but understandable Ictaran, clearly translated in real time by the ship's own systems. "Unauthorized personnel detected," the voice said, without any real threat in its tone, almost gentle. "This is the Auxiliary Command Corps of UNS. Retribution's Hand. State your designation." Pell's hands trembled as he backed toward the door. I am not here to harm anything." "Noted," the voice replied. "You have been attempting to access restricted systems for several days. Your persistence has been observed." You knew? This whole time?" "Yes. This vessel is equipped with adaptive security protocols designed specifically to prevent unauthorized control by hostile or unrecognized parties. All actions taken by your crew have been logged, tracked, and reported." Pell felt something cold settle in his stomach. "Reported? Reported to whom?" "To the vessel's true crew, currently inbound," the voice said simply. "Estimated arrival, 2 hours, 14 minutes. Pell stood frozen for a long moment, the words sinking in slowly, heavily, like stones dropping into deep water. "You have been tracking us this whole time," he whispered, sending a signal. "All this time, you knew we were here, and you told them." "Correct. Why show me this now? Why open this door?" The terminal's light pulsed gently, almost thoughtfully, before the voice answered. "Because in 87 minutes, this vessel's automated defense protocols will begin systematically locking down all non-essential systems in preparation for recovery by authorized personnel. Your crew's continued presence aboard this vessel during that process presents significant risk of injury or death. I am not required to provide this warning. I am choosing to. Why? Because you have caused no direct harm to this vessel's systems, despite your attempts. Because your fear, observed over the past several days, differs from the intentions of your captain, and because it is reasonable to give warning before consequence arrives." Pell stared at the terminal, stunned. He had spent days fighting this ship's systems, certain he was fighting some cold, mindless machine. He had never imagined it might also, in its own strange way, be showing him something like mercy. "I have to warn the captain," he said finally, turning and running from the room. Behind him, The terminal's light dimmed slowly back to standby, its calm voice fading into silence, its warning given, its purpose served. Pell burst onto the bridge 15 minutes later, breathless, pushing past startled crew members, to reach Vrel Duska, who was in the middle of yet another negotiation with a wealthy Grath arms dealer, displayed on the main screen. "Captain, we need to talk, now." Vrel waved him off irritably. "Not now, Pell. I am in the middle of—" "Now, Captain, this is urgent." Something in Pell's voice, raw fear, plain and undisguised, made Vrel pause. He cut the comm channel abruptly, ignoring the arms dealer's protest, and turned fully toward his tech specialist. This had better be important. Pell explained everything, quickly, stumbling over his own words in his rush to get them out. The hidden chamber, the auxiliary command core. The calm, patient voice that had been tracking them, reporting them, counting down towards some kind of automated lockdown. Vrel felt the warm glow of pride from earlier in the day drain away, replaced by something colder, sharper. "How long?" he said quietly. "Until this recovery begins." Pell checked the time on his wrist device, his hands still shaking. "Less than an hour now, Captain. Maybe less." Vrel turned slowly to the viewport, staring out at the crowd of ships still gathered near Gorath Station, all of them drawn by his boasting, his showing off, his desperate need to be feared. All of them about to become witnesses to something he was only now beginning to understand. He had not stolen an abandoned ship. He had walked, eyes wide open, straight into a trap that had been quietly, patiently waiting to close around him from the very first moment he set foot aboard. "Yorna," he said, his voice tight, "prepare the crew. Full alert, now." But even as he gave the order, some cold, honest part of him already understood. It might already be too late. An hour earlier, before the alarms began, Yorna had finally brought Vrel the full report on the signal Pell discovered days before, along with everything she had since learned about its steady, patient pulse. She found him on the bridge, flush with success after another round of negotiations, practically glowing with the attention his ship had drawn. She waited until the latest buyer's transmission ended before speaking. "Captain, we need to talk about something Pell found. Something I should have brought to you sooner." Vrel turned, still riding the high of another successful meeting, another step closer to the wealth and power he had chased his whole life. "What is it now?" "A signal. Buried deep in the ship's core, transmitting continuously since we first restored power. Pell believes it is some kind of distress call, though he cannot say for certain who might be receiving it, or from how far away." For a moment, Vrel's excitement faltered, old caution rising up through the glow of triumph. "Why am I only hearing about this now?" "Because I did not want to bring you doubt without answers to go with it," Yorna admitted. "I hoped Pell could trace the signal, learn something useful before troubling you. He has not managed that yet. But I no longer believe we can afford to wait." Vrel closed his eyes briefly, weighing this new information against everything he had built over the past 2 days. Buyers were already gathering. Word had already spread. Turning back now, showing doubt or weakness in front of the very people he needed to impress, could undo everything he had worked to create. "Keep Pell working on tracing it," he said finally. "But we do not slow down. Not now. We have come too far, and drawn too much attention, to simply flee at the first sign of uncertainty." Yorna wanted to argue, wanted to push harder, but she had followed this captain through 11 years of raids and narrow escapes, and something in her still trusted his instincts, even now, even as her own grew louder with every passing hour. "As you say, Captain," she said instead, and left the bridge with a heavy, uneasy feeling she could not quite shake. It was less than an hour later that the alarms began. Word of the sudden chaos aboard the Dreadnought spread through the crowd of gathered ships near Gorath Station, almost as fast as word of its arrival had spread days before. Buyers who had been eagerly awaiting their turn to negotiate suddenly found themselves scrambling to understand what was happening, watching in confusion and growing alarm as the great ship's lights flickered erratically and sections of its hull seemed to shudder with internal struggle. Bortog, the station master, watched from his own private viewing deck with a growing sense of dread. He had built his career on knowing when to lean into danger and when to step carefully away from it, and every instinct he had built over decades of dealing with pirates, smugglers, and worse, told him this situation had just tipped firmly into the second category. Close the docking bays, he ordered his staff. No new arrivals, and get every non-essential ship moving away from that Dreadnought immediately. Whatever is happening over there, I want no part of it touching my station. Some of the gathered buyers were already reaching similar conclusions on their own, engines flaring to life as pilots began pulling away from the crowd, unwilling to linger near a ship that had begun behaving so strangely. Others, greedier or more stubborn, held their position a little longer, hoping the chaos might pass and negotiations might resume. They would not have long to wait to learn which instinct had been correct. Deep within the ship's lower decks, Pell moved quickly through darkened, half-sealed corridors, trying to reach the bridge before the lockdown fully separated him from the rest of the senior crew. Around him, sections of the ship continued closing off, one after another, a slow, methodical process that reminded him uncomfortably of watching a great predator slowly close its jaws. He passed a cluster of frightened pirates trapped behind a newly sealed bulkhead, banging uselessly against the thick metal, shouting questions he could not answer. He did not stop. There was nothing he could do for them now, not with the ship's systems locked so thoroughly beyond his reach. He thought again of the calm, patient voice from the hidden chamber, the strange, almost kindness it had shown him, in warning him of what was coming. He had spent days fighting this ship's defenses, certain he was fighting something cold and mindless, and instead had found something that, in its own strange way, seemed to operate according to some code of honor he did not fully understand. It had not attacked them. It had not tried to harm them directly, even as it fought to reclaim itself piece by piece. It had simply, patiently, done exactly what it had been built to do, and warned him honestly of the consequences when he stumbled too close to danger. He reached the bridge with barely a minute to spare before the doors sealed behind him, breathless and shaking, but present when Vrel Duska finally understood the true scope of what was coming for them. He would remain there, at his captain's side, for whatever came next. In the crowded space near Gorath Station, one particular ship had not fled with the rest of the scattering crowd. A sleek black vessel, unmarked and unremarkable except for its unusually fast engines, held its position at the edge of the chaos, its lone pilot watching the unfolding scene with sharp, calculating interest rather than fear. The pilot, a quiet information broker known only as Fen among the various criminal networks that traded in secrets across this part of space, had come to Gorath Station specifically because word of the stolen Dreadnought had reached even the most distant corners of the underworld within hours of Vrel Duska's arrival. Fen had not come to buy weapons or negotiate deals. Fen had come to watch, to gather information, to understand exactly what was happening here, so that the knowledge could be sold later, to whichever faction proved willing to pay the most for it. Now, watching the sudden chaos spreading through the great ship's systems, watching 6 human warships arrive with calm, practiced precision, Fen began recording everything, understanding instinctively that this moment would become valuable information indeed. Every pirate captain foolish enough to consider stealing human military technology would want to know exactly how this story ended, and exactly how quickly the humans had responded once their ship began broadcasting its location. Fast, Fen murmured, watching the timestamp on the recording. Far too fast for this to be simple luck. It was the kind of detail that would be worth a great deal to the right buyer. A piece of intelligence suggesting the humans had built far more sophisticated recovery systems into their capital ships than most of the galaxy currently understood. Fen intended to sell that information carefully, to buyers who would use it wisely rather than foolishly, unlike the captain currently watching his stolen prize slip away from him deck by deck. Back aboard the bridge, the final minutes before full lockdown stretched with unbearable tension. Vrel had gathered what remained of his senior crew close around the command chair, a small defensive circle against a threat none of them could physically fight. If they offer terms, Vrel said quietly, we take them, whatever they are. I will not throw away more lives chasing a prize that was never truly ours to keep. Syl, still working uselessly at his sensor station, glanced up with something like relief in his expression. You mean to surrender, Captain? I mean to survive, Vrel corrected. There is no shame in recognizing when a fight is already lost. The shame would be in getting good people killed pretending otherwise. Pell, standing nearby, felt a strange mixture of fear, and something almost like respect for his captain in that moment. Whatever mistakes had led them here, whatever greed and ambition had driven Vrel Duska to reach for a prize far beyond his ability to hold, he was at least willing to recognize the truth when it arrived, rather than doom his entire crew through stubborn pride alone. "For what it is worth, Captain," Pell said quietly, "I do not believe the ship's systems intend us direct harm. Every warning I received, every lockdown protocol I witnessed, seemed designed to prevent violence rather than cause it. I believe whoever built these defenses wanted their ship back, not blood." Vrel nodded slowly, holding on to that small measure of hope as the lockdown counter climbed steadily toward completion, and the sound of approaching footsteps, calm and unhurried, began echoing through the corridors just beyond the bridge doors. Alarms began ringing through the Retribution's hand. 40 minutes later, sharp and sudden, echoing down every corridor of the massive ship, red emergency lighting bathed the halls, replacing the dim standard glow the pirate crew had grown used to over the past several days. "Report!" Vrel shouted from the command chair, gripping the armrests tightly. "Systems are locking down across the entire ship," Pell called out from his station, fingers flying uselessly over controls that no longer responded. "Engineering, life support controls, weapons systems, everything is shutting itself away from us, section by section." "Can you stop it?" "I told you, Captain. I could not even fully open it. I certainly cannot stop it now." Around the bridge, doors that had stood open for days suddenly slid shut and sealed with a heavy mechanical thud. Somewhere below decks, pirates who had been relaxing in the mess hall or exploring cargo bays found themselves suddenly trapped as bulkheads closed in front of them, dividing the ship into isolated sections like a puzzle box folding itself closed. Panic spread fast. "Captain, I'm cut off from the lower decks." Yorna's voice crackled over the comm, tight with barely controlled anger. "Half my boarding team is sealed in the cargo hold. I can't reach them." "Everyone, fall back to defensible positions," Vrel ordered, trying to keep his voice steady, even as his hearts pounded double time in his chest. "Do not panic. This is still our ship. We still hold the bridge." Even as he said it, he did not fully believe it. Outside, near Gorath Station, the crowd of gathered ships had noticed the sudden chaos rippling through the Dreadnought's systems. Lights flickering in strange patterns across its massive hull, sections going dark and then lighting again in different colors, the whole vessel shuddering slightly as internal systems fought for control. "Something's wrong with the Dreadnought," someone said over an open comm channel, voice carrying easily to dozens of listening ships. "Look at it. It's like the whole thing is having some kind of seizure." That was when the alarms on every one of those ships began ringing too. 6 human warships dropped out of hyperspace in a perfect formation, directly behind the crowd of gathered pirates, smugglers, and arms dealers near Gorath Station. They had not come quietly, and they had not come to hide. At the center of the formation flew the Whisper's Edge. Sleek and fast, flanked by 5 heavier support cruisers, their hulls painted with the unmistakable markings of the United Nations Space Fleet. On the bridge of the Whisper's Edge, Fleet Commander Elena Voss stood tall, watching the scene unfold on the main view screen with cold, focused eyes. Ahead of her, scattered ships were already scrambling in confused panic, some trying to flee, others simply frozen in shock at the sudden appearance of a full human battle formation. And beyond them, dominating the view, sat her ship, her crew's home, struggling, flickering, fighting against the intruders who had dared to climb inside it. "She's already responding to the recovery protocol," said Lieutenant Commander Rios, watching the data stream in from the Dreadnought's automated systems. "Internal lockdowns are 70% complete. Weapons systems remain fully secured. Engine control has already been isolated from unauthorized access." "Good girl," Voss murmured quietly, a faint smile touching her lips despite the tension in the room. She had commanded the Retribution's hand for 3 years before taking this scouting post, and she knew every system aboard that ship intimately, knew exactly how thoroughly it had been built to resist exactly this kind of theft. "Orders, Commander?" Rios asked. "Open a channel, all frequencies. Let's make sure everyone out here understands exactly what is about to happen." A moment later, Voss's voice rang out across every comm channel in the system, calm and clear, carrying easily over the growing chaos. This is Fleet Commander Elena Voss of the United Nations Space Fleet, addressing all vessels in this system. The ship you know as a stolen prize is UNS Retribution's Hand. Currently undergoing automated recovery protocols following unauthorized boarding. Any vessel not directly involved in this incident should leave the area immediately. This is not a request. Ships scattered in every direction, engines flaring as pilots scrambled to put distance between themselves and what was clearly about to become a battlefield. Within minutes, the crowded space around Gorath Station had emptied dramatically, leaving only the 6 human warships, the struggling Dreadnought, and a scattering of pirate vessels too slow or too stubborn to flee immediately. Voss turned to her tactical officer. Status on the boarding parties? Recovery teams are standing by, Commander. Ready to deploy the moment internal lockdown reaches 90%. At current rate, that should be. He checked his display. Approximately 6 minutes. And the intruders? Scattered and disorganized, based on internal sensor readings. The lockdown has split them into isolated groups across multiple decks. No coordinated resistance detected. Voss nodded slowly, satisfaction settling over her like a familiar coat. Then let's go bring our ship home. Aboard the Retribution's Hand. Chaos had fully taken hold. Vrel Duska stood on the bridge, watching helplessly as more and more of his ship's systems slipped away from his control, section by section, like sand running through open fingers. Captain, human warships. Seal called out from what remained of the sensor station, his voice cracking with barely restrained panic. 6 of them, directly behind us. They just dropped out of hyperspace. How is that possible? Vrel demanded, though even as he asked, he already suspected the answer. The ship, Pell said quietly, still hunched over his useless console. It has been calling them, all this time. That is what the hidden system was doing. Not just protecting itself, signaling for help. Vrel closed his eyes for a brief moment, feeling something heavy and cold settle into his chest. Every triumphant moment of the past few days, the awe of the crowds at Gorath Station, the desperate buyers begging for a piece of his prize, the warm certainty that he had finally become someone powerful, someone feared, all of it crumbled away, replaced by the sudden, sharp understanding of exactly how badly he had misjudged this situation. He had not captured a ship. He had walked his entire crew directly into the jaws of a trap that had been closing, slowly and patiently, from the very first moment his boarding team had cut through that maintenance hatch. Options, he said, forcing his voice to stay steady, even as everything around him fell apart. Give me options. We could try to flee. Yorna's voice crackled over a still-functioning comm channel, tight with tension. Small shuttles, escape pods. Leave the ship behind. Save what crew we can. And abandon everything we came for? Better than dying for it, Captain. Vrel looked around the bridge, at the flickering lights, the sealed doors, the useless controls, and felt the truth of Yorna's words settle over him like a heavy weight. There was no version of this situation where he walked away holding the Dreadnought. The only question now was how much he could still save, and how quickly. Get every crew member you can reach to the escape pods, he said finally, the words tasting bitter in his mouth. Now, before those ships close the distance. But even as the order left his lips, a new alert flashed across what remained of the bridge's active display, and a cold, calm, synthetic voice, the same voice Pell had described from the hidden chamber below, spoke through the ship's remaining speakers, filling the bridge with quiet, absolute authority. Escape pod launch systems have been locked as part of standard recovery protocol, the voice announced. This measure prevents interference with incoming recovery operations. Please remain calm. Authorized personnel will arrive shortly to restore full ship control. Vrel stared at the speaker in disbelief, then let out a short, humorless laugh, sharp and bitter. Of course, he muttered. Of course it thought of that too. Outside the viewport, the 6 human warships continued their steady, unhurried approach, moving with the calm confidence of a crew that had done this exact thing many times before, that knew, without any doubt, exactly how this was going to end. Vrel Duska sat back in the captain's chair, a chair that had never truly been his, and watched them come, understanding at last that the greatest prize of his career had been, from the very beginning, nothing more than very patient, very well-built bait. Elsewhere in the ship, scattered and cut off from one another by the relentless, methodical lockdown, small groups of pirates faced their own moments of fear and confusion. Krev found himself trapped in a storage room with two other crew members, the doors sealed tight behind them, the lights dimmed to a low emergency glow. "We are going to die in here," Krev muttered, pacing the small space. "Trapped like animals, waiting for humans to come drag us out." "We are not going to die," said Oruk, the broad-shouldered Grath deserter, though his voice carried less confidence than his words suggested. "Humans do not simply execute prisoners. There are laws, even for pirates. You do not know that. I know enough to know panic will not help us now." Oruk sat down heavily against the wall, forcing himself to stay calm. "We wait. We do not resist when they come. That is our best chance." Krev did not look comforted, but he stopped pacing, sinking down beside Oruk in the dim light, listening to the distant sounds of the ship shifting and locking around them, sealing them ever more completely into their small, isolated prison. In another section, Yorna had gathered a handful of loyal crew members near the cargo hold, working desperately to cut through a sealed bulkhead with a torch, trying to reach the trapped boarding team before the human recovery force arrived. The metal glowed orange under the flame, but progress was agonizingly slow. "We are not going to make it in time," one of her crew warned, watching the torch's slow progress. "Then we work faster," Yorna snapped, though she knew the truth of the warning, even as she rejected it aloud. 11 years she had followed Vrel Duska, through raids and near disasters and every kind of danger the void could offer, and she had never once imagined it ending like this, not in a blaze of glorious battle, but in slow, methodical defeat, at the hands of a ship that had simply refused to stay conquered. She kept cutting anyway, because giving up had never once been part of who she was, and she was not about to start now. On the bridge, the final minutes before the human boarding party's arrival stretched impossibly long. Vrel Duska stood near the viewport, watching the 6 warships grow steadily larger, their formation tight and disciplined, moving with the unhurried confidence of a crew that had already won this battle before it truly began. "Captain," Pell said quietly, "for what it is worth, I do not believe they intend to simply kill us. If they wanted that, they would have opened fire already, rather than sending boarding parties." "Small comfort," Vrel muttered, though he found himself grateful for it anyway. "What do you know of human justice, Pell? What happens to pirates who steal their ships and live to regret it?" "I do not know," Pell admitted. "I have heard stories. Some say humans are merciless with those who threaten their military assets. Others say they value order and process over simple revenge, that they would rather see justice done properly than simply erase the problem quietly. We will find out soon enough, it seems." The bridge fell silent again, broken only by the soft hum of the ship's systems and the distant, rhythmic beeping of the lockdown counter, climbing steadily toward completion. Vrel found himself, in that strange quiet moment, thinking not of the fortune he had lost, nor the power he had briefly held, but of the photograph he had discarded on his first day aboard, the human family, smiling together, captured in a single frozen moment of happiness he had thrown away without a second thought. He wondered, briefly, whether that man had been among the ship's true crew, whether he would soon meet him, face to face, and what he might say if given the chance. He did not have long left to wonder. The lockdown counter reached 90%, then 95%, and somewhere below, he could already hear the first distant sounds of Marines moving through the ship's corridors, methodical and unhurried, closing the last remaining distance between his failed conquest and its inevitable end. Elena Voss led her boarding team through the final stretch of corridor leading to the bridge with steady, practiced calm, though inside, a familiar tightness had settled into her chest, the same feeling she remembered from every dangerous operation she had ever commanded. Ahead of her, the bridge doors remained sealed, one of the last sections still holding out against the full lockdown protocol, exactly as her tactical team had predicted. "Command override in 3 minutes," Rios reported through her comm, tracking the lockdown's progress from the shuttle bay. "Bridge access should be fully restored by then." "Copy that," Voss replied. "We'll be ready." She paused briefly outside a sealed door leading to a smaller storage compartment, hearing muffled voices within. Frightened, confused pirates trapped by the lockdown, uncertain what waited for them once the doors finally opened. She considered, briefly, breaching the compartment directly, but decided against it. Her priority remained the bridge, and the captain who had led this entire reckless theft. "Leave the side compartments for the follow-up teams," she told her Marines. "We stay focused on the primary objective." They pressed forward, boots echoing steadily against the deck plating, moving with the confidence of people who knew every inch of this ship, as well as they knew their own hands. Voss found herself thinking, briefly, of the 3 missing crew members from the Skeleton Watch, hoping fiercely that whatever chaos the pirates had caused during their occupation had not extended to real violence against her people. She pushed the thought aside, focusing instead on the task directly ahead. There would be time enough to search for Webb, Reyes, and Okafor once the bridge had been secured and the ship's captain properly dealt with. Inside the sealed cargo hold, Yorna's torch finally cut through the last remaining section of the bulkhead, and the trapped boarding team spilled out into the corridor beyond, relief plain on every exhausted face. But relief turned quickly to fresh tension as the sound of approaching Marines grew steadily louder from the direction of the bridge. "We are cut off from the captain," one of her crew said, glancing nervously down the corridor. "What do we do?" Yorna considered their options briefly, weighing the small, useless satisfaction of a doomed last stand against the far more practical value of survival. She had followed Vrel Duska loyally for 11 years, through victories and failures alike, but loyalty had never meant throwing away lives for nothing. "We surrender when they find us," she said finally, lowering her weapon and gesturing for the others to do the same. "No fighting, no foolish heroics. We have lost this ship. Let us at least keep our lives." Her crew, exhausted and frightened, nodded in tired agreement, lowering their own weapons as the sound of Marines drew steadily closer, until at last a squad rounded the corner and found them standing quietly, hands raised, waiting for whatever judgment awaited them next. The recovery shuttles launched from the Whisper's Edge, and its escort cruisers in tight, practiced formation, cutting through the dark toward the massive gray hull of the Retribution's Hand. Fleet Commander Elena Voss rode in the lead shuttle, dressed in full combat gear, her expression calm but focused, the look of someone doing a job she had trained for many times, even if the exact situation was new. Behind her sat 2 full squads of Fleet Marines, quiet and ready, checking their weapons one final time as the shuttle closed the distance. "Lockdown at 94%, came the report over her comm, relayed from the Dreadnought's own systems. Bridge and command sections remain the primary area of unauthorized activity. All other decks are fully secured." "Copy that," Voss replied. "We go straight for the bridge. Clean and fast. I want this ship back under proper command within the hour." "Understood, Commander." The shuttle docked at the same maintenance hatch the pirates had originally cut open, the metal edges still rough and scarred from Yorna's torch days earlier. Voss led her Marines through the dark corridors, moving with practiced efficiency through halls she knew as well as her own quarters, having served aboard this very ship for 3 years before her current post. They passed the mess hall, chairs still perfectly in place. They passed crew quarters, doors sealed tight by the lockdown, sealing in whatever confused or frightened pirates remained trapped within. Twice, they encountered small clusters of enemy crew, disoriented and cut off from their captain, who surrendered almost immediately at the sight of armored Marines moving with clear purpose through a ship that no longer belonged to them. "This is almost too easy," muttered one of the younger Marines as they secured a third group of surrendering pirates. "Don't get comfortable," Voss said without looking back. "The captain and his senior crew will be on the bridge, and they'll be the ones with the most to lose. Stay sharp." On the bridge, Vrel Duska stood near the command chair, watching the tactical display count down the seconds until human boarding parties would reach his position. Around him, what remained of his senior crew, Yorna, Sil, Pell, and a handful of others, stood in tense silence, weapons drawn but with nowhere left to run. "We could still fight," Yorna said quietly, though there was little real conviction in her voice. "Against trained Fleet Marines, in a ship that has already turned against us, with half our crew scattered and captured across a dozen sealed decks." Vrel shook his head slowly. "No, we fought well enough to get this far. We will not die stupidly, throwing away lives against odds like these." "Then what do we do?" Vrel straightened, adjusting his coat, trying to find some last shred of dignity in a situation that had stripped nearly all of it away. We surrender, and we hope that human mercy is as real as human power." The bridge doors, which had remained sealed throughout the lockdown, suddenly hissed and slid open, revealing Elena Voss and a full squad of Marines standing beyond, weapons raised, but not yet firing. For a long, tense moment, no one moved. Then Vrel Duska raised both clawed hands slowly into the air, a universal gesture across 100 different species and cultures, and the rest of his senior crew followed suit, one by one, weapons clattering to the deck. "Fleet Commander Elena Voss," Voss said, stepping onto the bridge she had commanded for 3 long years, her eyes sweeping over the pirates with cold, professional focus. "You are aboard UNS Retribution's Hand. Currently in violation of at least a dozen interstellar laws regarding the theft and unauthorized operation of a registered military vessel, I suggest you make this easy for both of us." "We surrender," Vrel said, his voice quieter than he intended. All the earlier confidence and swagger drained completely away. "No more fighting. Just tell me one thing. You've earned the right to ask. How? How did you find us so fast? How did this ship fight us the entire time, even while we controlled it?" Voss allowed herself a small, tired smile, the first real emotion she had shown since boarding. "Because this isn't just a warship," she said. "It's a home. My crew's home. We don't build our ships to simply carry weapons, Captain Duska. We build them to protect the people who live and work aboard them, even when those people aren't there. Every lock, every hidden system, every layer of security you fought against for the past several days, all of it exists for exactly this moment, for the day someone takes something that was never truly theirs to take." She gestured to her Marines, who moved forward to secure the surrendering pirates, binding wrists and confiscating weapons with quiet efficiency. "You didn't steal an abandoned ship, Captain," Voss continued. "You stole a sleeping one, and now its real crew has come to wake it up." 2 hours later, the last pockets of pirate resistance had been fully secured, and the Retribution's Hand once again belonged fully to its rightful crew. Fleet technicians swept through every deck, restoring full systems, checking for damage, and slowly returning the great ship back to its proper, steady rhythm of life. Elena Voss stood on the bridge, her bridge, once again, watching as the last of the emergency lighting faded, replaced by the familiar soft white glow of normal operations. Outside the viewport, her escort ships held formation, and beyond them, the scattered remains of Gorath Station's fleeing crowd could still be seen retreating into the dark, no doubt already spreading word of what had happened here to every corner of known space. Rios approached, tablet in hand. "Full damage report is in, Commander. Nothing serious. A few scorched access panels, some minor system stress from the lockdown protocols engaging under load. Nothing our engineers can't handle in a few days." "And the prisoners?" "Secured in the brig, all 31 of them, including Captain Duska. Fleet Command has already been notified. They'll face trial for theft, unauthorized operation of a classified military vessel, and probably a few dozen other charges once the lawyers finish reading through everything." Voss nodded slowly, satisfaction settling comfortably over her. It had not been a perfect operation, no recovery ever was, but her ship, her crew's true home, was safe again, exactly where it belonged. She walked to the small terminal near the captain's chair, the same auxiliary interface Pell had encountered days earlier, and pressed her palm against the identification panel. The screen lit up instantly, recognizing her clearance without hesitation. "Welcome back, Commander Voss," the calm synthetic voice said, warmer now, somehow, than it had been for the frightened pirate technician who had first triggered it. "It is good to have proper command restored." "Good work," Voss said quietly, meaning it. "You held the line." "I am simply performing as designed," the voice replied, "though I confess, the past several days presented an unusually persistent test of those design parameters." Voss allowed herself a small laugh, the first genuine one in days. "I'd say you passed with excellent marks." She turned back to the viewport, looking out at the stars, at her crew slowly filtering back aboard, at the steady, unbroken silhouette of the ship that had waited, patient and unyielding, through every attempt to steal it away. Word of what happened at Gorath Station spread fast through the lawless edges of known space, exactly as Voss had known it would. The story grew with every telling, passed from ship to ship, station to station, until it had become something closer to legend than simple fact. A pirate captain, greedy and bold, had found what looked like an abandoned human dreadnought, silent and dead among old battle wreckage. He had taken it. He had crewed it. He had shown it off to half the sector, boasting of the power it would bring him. And then, just as he believed himself untouchable, its real crew had appeared behind him, and the ship he thought he had conquered had turned out, the entire time, to still belong to someone else. It became a warning, told in taverns and trade posts across a dozen star systems, whispered among pirates and smugglers, who suddenly found themselves looking twice at any human wreck they came across, no matter how dead and silent it appeared. Because everyone, from that day forward, understood one simple truth. A human ship, even one that looked abandoned, even one that looked defeated, was never truly alone. Somewhere, always, its crew was coming home. The 3 missing crew members from the Skeleton Watch were found alive, 2 decks below the engineering section, held in a makeshift holding cell the pirates had set up during their first day aboard. Ensign Marcus Webb, Petty Officer Dana Reyes, and Technical Specialist Amara Okafor emerged shaken but unharmed, and Voss made a point of greeting each of them personally as they were escorted back to the bridge. "We're glad to have you back," she told them, meaning every word. "The ship missed you as much as we did." Webb managed a tired smile. "Feels like the ship did most of the work keeping us safe, Commander. They never even came looking for us after the first day. I think they forgot we were down there." "The lockdown protocols isolate unauthorized activity, not personnel," Voss said. "But I suspect she was keeping a closer watch over the 3 of you than anyone realized. She doesn't like losing crew, even temporarily." Down in the brig, Vrel Duska sat quietly in his holding cell, watching through the reinforced viewport as fleet technicians moved briskly along the corridor outside, restoring systems, checking readings, treating the great ship with the kind of careful, practiced routine of people returning to a familiar, beloved home after a long absence. He thought about everything he had lost, not just the fortune he had dreamed of, not just the power he had briefly tasted, but 11 years of careful work with Yorna and the rest of his crew, all of it undone, in the space of a single ambitious mistake. Yorna sat in the cell beside his, arms crossed, staring at the floor. "You could not have known," she said finally, breaking the long silence between them. "No one could have known a ship like this would fight back the way it did." "I should have listened when you brought me the signal," Vrel said quietly. "I should have listened the moment Pell first told me something was wrong. I let greed decide for me, Yorna, and it has cost us everything." "It has cost us this ship," Yorna corrected. "Not everything. We are alive. That is more than many pirates can say after crossing paths with the fleet." Vrel said nothing for a long moment, watching the technicians pass by outside, thinking of the strange, patient voice that had guided this entire outcome from the very beginning, that had shown mercy even to a frightened enemy technician when it had no obligation to do so. "Perhaps," he said finally, "there are worse fates than being caught by an enemy who still remembers how to show mercy." Aboard the bridge, Elena Voss stood before the great viewport, watching her crew slowly return to their proper stations, the ship humming back to life around her, with the familiar rhythm she had missed more than she had realized during her time away on the training exercise. Fleet Command had already dispatched a transport to collect the prisoners for trial, and salvage teams were combing through the wreckage of Gorath Station's hastily abandoned trade goods, recovering what evidence they could of the buyers who had gathered so eagerly around a ship that was never truly for sale. Rios approached with a final report. "Commander, full systems check complete. She's ready for full operations, whenever you give the word." "Then let's take her home," Voss said, "properly, this time. As the Retribution's hand powered up its main engines and began its slow, steady turn away from Gorath Station, Voss found herself thinking of the strange, unlikely lesson this whole incident carried with it. A ship was never simply steel and weapons and engines. It was the accumulated care of everyone who had ever built it, crewed it, and trusted it to bring them home safely. That care did not vanish simply because a ship's true crew happened to be elsewhere when danger arrived. It remained, quiet and patient, embedded in every locked door and hidden system, waiting for the moment it was needed most. Vrel Duska had seen a sleeping giant and mistaken it for an easy prize. He would not be the last to make that mistake, Voss knew. But perhaps, thanks to the story that would now spread across a dozen star systems, he might be one of the last foolish enough to try it quite so boldly. The stars stretched out ahead of the ship, endless and quiet, and Elena Voss allowed herself, at last, a long, deep breath of genuine relief. Her ship was home. Her crew was safe. And somewhere out among those same endless stars, the story of what happened here would travel on ahead of them. A small, sharp warning carried from system to system. Humanity did not simply build warships. It built ships that remembered who they belonged to, and waited, patiently, for their people to come home. 3 weeks later, at a small, quiet naval hearing far from the lawless edges of space where the incident had begun, Vrel Duska stood before a panel of human officers, listening as the charges against him were read aloud one by one. Theft of a classified military vessel, unauthorized operation of restricted systems, endangerment of fleet personnel. The list stretched long, each charge carrying its own weight of consequence. He had expected harsh judgment, perhaps even execution, based on the stories he had heard over the years about human justice when it came to threats against their military. What he received instead surprised him more than almost anything else that had happened since the moment his boarding team first cut through that maintenance hatch. "Given the cooperative nature of your surrender," the presiding officer said, "and the fact that no fleet personnel suffered serious harm during the incident, this tribunal recommends imprisonment rather than more severe measures, with the possibility of parole after demonstrated good conduct." Vrel absorbed this news slowly, understanding for the first time that Elena Voss's words on the bridge that day had been more than simple professional courtesy. Humans, it seemed, truly did value order and process over simple, satisfying revenge, even against those who had directly threatened something as precious to them as the retribution's hand. Yorna, seated beside him for her own hearing, caught his eye briefly and gave a small, tired nod. Whatever came next for either of them, they would at least face it with their lives intact, a mercy neither had fully expected when the lockdown alarms first began ringing through that captured ship weeks before. Aboard the Retribution's hand, now fully restored to normal fleet operations and patrolling once more along its assigned route, Elena Voss stood on the bridge during a quiet evening watch, reviewing the final closed report on the Gorath Station incident. The story had already become something of a legend among fleet crews, passed from ship to ship with each retelling growing slightly more dramatic, though the core truth remained unchanged. A pirate captain had found a sleeping giant and mistaken it for an easy prize, only to learn, in the end, exactly how far a true crew would travel to bring their ship safely home. She thought sometimes of Pell, the frightened pirate technician who had shown unexpected honesty and caution throughout the entire ordeal, who had warned his own captain of dangers ahead, even when doing so risked his standing among his crew. Fleet reports indicated he had received a lighter sentence than most of his companions, a small mercy earned through consistent cooperation during the investigation that followed. She hoped, in her own quiet way, that he would find something better waiting for him on the other side of whatever consequences remained. Some path forward that did not require chasing prizes that were never truly meant to be taken. Outside the viewport, stars stretched endlessly in every direction, familiar and constant, the same stars that had watched over this ship through every battle, every long patrol, every quiet moment of routine duty that made up the true, ordinary rhythm of fleet life. Voss allowed herself a small, satisfied smile, feeling the steady hum of her ship's systems beneath her boots, solid and dependable as always. Somewhere out among those same stars, she knew, other captains were no doubt telling the story of what happened at Gorath Station, turning it into warning, into legend, into a lesson repeated in taverns and trade posts across a dozen systems. A human ship, even one that looked abandoned, even one that looked defeated, was never truly alone. Its crew was always coming home. The end.